Hello everyone, welcome to another Is It Genesis Ready? So, you if you've been here this long, you should know about what this is about. If not, we're just going to take a look at some structure. We are taking a look at some structured decks and seeing if they're out of the box, ready to be used in the Genesis format, as well as a brief summary on how they might stand up in that current Genesis format. And I'm also thinking on putting a cap because structured decks are still coming out, so I might stop right at when we reach the Arc 5 era. That would probably be the ones that will never make it into Genesis. But for now, we are looking at oh, we are looking at Warriors Strike. So this one is a two-part. Actually, no, it's a triple layer part because we have Warriors, which I guess would also segue into using equip spells. And to top it all off, we also have Genesis monsters. No, not Genesis, Gemini monsters, which, bless their hearts, they try to make it a viable thing to use, but uh, it's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. It's like it's like resuscitating a vegetable, I think. But, who knows? Maybe they'll actually manage to make Gemini's viable somehow, one way or another. But enough bringing the Geminis down. Let's just see. Let's have a look. Like, I thought it was a cool enough deck to use. I tried it, but I'm seeing the problems now. And it might be too slow for nowadays. But let's take a look. First off, we have, once again, the Ace Monster. As I recall, not needing a special summon, but, I mean, it is a Gemini, correct? Yes, so it has enough problems already. But it is a level 8 normal monster with almost good stats. So, what does Phoenix Gearfried bring to the table? Well, first, let's explain what a Gemini monster is. So, while face up on the field or in the graveyard, it is treated as a normal monster. However, if it's a normal monster on the field, you can use your normal summon to turn it into an effect monster, and it will gain the effect listed after the bullet point. And that effect is, let's see, for Gearfried here, the effect is as follows. If your opponent activates a spell card, you can target a Gemini in the graveyard, special summon it. Then also, during either player's turn, when a spell or trap is activated that targets a monster on the field, you can send a equip spell you control to the graveyard to negate the activation and destroy it. So, when your opponent activates a spell card, you can special summon a Gemini from the graveyard. And this also negates targeting effects. So first off, it's a Gemini monster. It being a normal monster can lend to some support because there are a good amount of cards that support normal monsters. But in order to get the effect listed here, you'd have to use up your other normal summon, which might not be too bad, I suppose, but it's like putting your eggs into one basket, and the basket here, it's sort of not. It sounds good on paper, but in practice, in the current meta, I don't see it getting very far. First of all, like, both can be explained with one thing. Most of the good spell cards that you would want to hit your opponent, A, would likely get everything off the field, so using this effect would just be you bringing another monster out to be gotten rid of. And B, doesn't target. So the second effect, I doubt, will come up that often. So, yes, this, as far as ace monsters go, is possibly on the D tier. But it's here, and it's possible that uh, the deck might be able to supplement this somehow, but I don't see it. Next, Evocator Chevalier. I believe this could be seen as a second in command to Phoenix Gearfried. Let's see. A Gemini monster, pretty decent stats for a level 4 normal monster. And its Gemini effect is you can send an equipped spell to the graveyard, then target a card your opponent controls and destroy that target. This one is a bit more worth using your normal summon to get this guy out, especially because this deck, as I recall, utilizes a lot of equip spells, including one famous one that would have can be forgiven to think that would boost Gemini into viability, but for all the reasons that has been listed why Geminis aren't that great, the equip card itself is try as it might, it's not going to do it. But as far as Gemini effects go, this one is pretty decent. I'd say B tier, perhaps. But again, it targets, so it's an uphill battle here. Featherizer, I believe this one is a Gemini support card. Yes, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can send a Gemini monster from the deck to the graveyard and draw a card. A floater. No, it's so it's if it's destroyed by battle. This is what's the word? Recruiter? No. Well, whatever it's called. And worse, it doesn't summon, it sends Geminis, but lets you draw a card. Now, I believe I've stated before that the whole effect falls flat if it's destroyed by any other means outside of battle. And you will likely have this set face down. Well, your opponent will likely not want to go in to attack into it, so they'll just use Lightning Vortex, Raigeki, Lightning Strike, whatever it's called. Was it Raigeki Strike? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. And that means Featherizer's effect falls flat, which is a shame because for this Gemini deck, yes, sending a Gemini monster to the graveyard will prime your strategy, and it will also allow you to draw a card. That's a 2-for-1. A shame that it has to be destroyed by battle to get this off. This puts the ball in your opponent's court, which is generally not a good thing to do. Alright, Gemini Soldier. I don't recall this one being that good, but I could have been misguided at the time. Let's see. Nope. It is... Oh, wait. Yeah, it might have something. Yeah, it might have something, and I have something. Okay. Gemini Monster. Its Gemini effect is once per turn, if this card would be destroyed by battle, it is not destroyed. If this card battles after damage calculation, you can special summon a level 4 lower Gemini from the deck, except for Gemini Soldier. This one has a touch more potential, but let's see. Yeah, it has a touch more potential, mostly due to the equip spell that we'll get into later. But let's just say, by some chance that this strategy can do, that you have this out on the field on your turn 1, and then it's your opponent's turn. They attack into this, you get out another level 4. Like, this is a recruiter without having to be without being destroyed by battle. Well, it's not a recruiter. What is it called? What is the term? A floater, I guess. Yeah, a floater. It's a floater that doesn't get destroyed by a battle. but it's once per turn that it's not destroyed by battle. And it's a bit better because it's not just one monster being replaced by another. It's one monster that will give you another on the field, which makes it slightly better, but it's still a floater, which in the current um, place, it's not really going to do anything for you. So, again, another card that puts the ball in your opponent's court, but this one requires setup to actually work. Okay, we have Spell Striker. Now this one is pretty good for the strategy of the deck, possibly. Yeah, it's a side part. Possibly if your opponent is at range for this card's... No, yeah. If this card... Yeah, if your opponent is in range of this card's attack, this is a pretty good side strategy to utilize. Simply put, it can be special summoned by banishing a spell card in the graveyard, which this deck will likely have. And this card can attack directly, and you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. So, I think it could lend itself to a few other strategies in the deck. I think there's a spell card that can possibly utilize this effect. I'm not sure. But I remember this card very fondly, and I think it might have a chance to rise above if the right person can figure out a strategy using him. I see potential in this card. Freed, the Matchless General, because Warrior deck. Level 5, 2300 attack, 1700 defense. Negate any spell effects that target this card, and if you do, destroy that spell. Excuse me. During your draw phase, instead of conducting your normal draw, you can add a level 4 or lower warrior type monster from the deck to your hand. This card must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. So, essentially, this is more of a win more card, but lower because you have to have this guy on the field and have to have this guy survive your opponent's turn in order to make use of its search effect. Like, let me put it like this. Why would you have Freed the Matchless General when you can just put in, dang it, I am forgetting names. Reinforcement of the Army. Why have Freed the Matchless General when you can have Reinforcement of the Army? Marauding Captain. Everybody's favorite. Let's see. Like, it would be perfect for a level 3 rank monster. It's also amazing in a synchro deck. And it's good for getting your level 4 monster out. You know, a whole bunch of stuff. It's usable in Genesys. Because, oh, and it also lends for somewhat defensive strategy if, you know, like, the lesser part of the effect is monsters your opponent controls cannot target warrior monsters for attacks except for this guy. When this card is normal summon, you can special summon a level 4 lower monster from your hand. That's the meat and bones of this effect. You summon this guy, get to special summon another monster. That's why this guy was so big. This first effect might play into part, but generally it doesn't. You'll mostly be using Marauding Captain's effect to have an instant level 7 or lower synchro, or an instant rank 3 Xyz monster. Or you could use this as a starter for a chain effect. For a monster that comes out, it has an effect that activates on summon. You can even use this as part of a double summon effect, but why would you? You know? So yeah. Marauding Captain's a good addition for this deck. And we'll just speed through these three. I believe I've explained these before. We've got Exiled Force, Tribute. Let's see. We've got Exiled. You know what? Let me just open them up. real quick so we can just go through them gunshot mode. Okay. Exiled Force. Tribute this guy. Target a monster in the field. Destroy that target. A 1-for-1 strategy. The only reason it's here, I'm guessing, is because it's a warrior type monster, but it's not really a good trade-off because a bunch of monsters can't be targeted, and this would more often than not just give you a -1 to minus their field advantage, and no, that's not a good thing to have. DD Warrior Lady, a much better option because when this card battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that monster and banish this card. So this is a very good field trap. Like if you get past it getting destroyed, it could also, let's see, you can also use its effects. And I think there are a few strategies in this deck that mitigates damage. And then Card Trooper. This guy's here to help you sift through your deck. You can choose a number from 1 to 3, send that many cards from the top of the deck to the graveyard. This deck wants cards in the graveyard, so that helps. And if this card is destroyed, period, and sent to the graveyard, draw a card. This is a much better floater effect. It doesn't summon a monster, but does give you hand advantage. So yes. These three, DD Warrior Lady and Card Trooper, are keepers. Exiled Force is just here because it's a warrior monster, but I don't see it making much of a splash in the deck. And with that, we've quickly reached the quarter point. So, first quarter review. It's a warrior deck. And it's a warrior deck with Gemini monsters. Its ace monster isn't really giving me any feelings of reliability. So it's going to be relying on the rest of the deck to supplement it. Now, its only saving grace is that more often than not, it's going to be a level 8 normal monster, and there are a few cards that utilize that fact. But those cards might not be worth running. But let's see how the rest of the deck looks. Let's see. We've got another Gemini support card, Gemini Summoner. Let's see. Okay. Once per turn, during your opponent's end phase, you can pay 500 life points to normal summon or set a Gemini monster from the hand, or normal summon a face-up Gemini monster you control. The first time this card would be destroyed by a battle each turn, it is not destroyed. I think I recall a whole bunch of cards that just puts the ball in your opponent's court, relying on your opponent not getting rid of your monsters to use them. This one specifically has to be activated during your opponent's end phase. Now, granted, you could use a card like Call of the Haunted to summon this guy during your opponent's main phase too. That's possible. Let's see. But then the most you would get out of this guy is quote unquote normal summoning a Gemini monster from the hand. And again, battle protection is not that strong. Protection from destruction itself is much better. So yes, Gemini Summoner is definitely one that you would want to replace. Alright, I believe this one is a kingpin for the Gemini strategy. Blazewing Butterfly. Gemini effect is, you contribute this card, then target a Gemini monster in the graveyard that isn't Blazewing Butterfly. Special summon that target, it becomes an effect monster and gains its effect. So yes, that is a very powerful effect for Gemini. So yeah, this would be a definite staple for the Gemini strategy. Because you Gemini summon this guy, and you essentially have any Gemini monster from your graveyard. So yes, this deck definitely wants to have its Gemini monsters in the graveyard. And you can target any Gemini monster. So, if you happen to have... what were the first two we mentioned? If you happen to have Phoenix Gearfried or Evocato Chevalier in the graveyard, Gemini Summon Blazewing Butterfly, you now have those guys out on the field, ready to go. So yes, definitely, Blazewing Butterfly is a definite keeper, and it's also fortuitous that they decided to give us 2 for the deck. Different Dimension Warrior, I believe, has a similar effect to Different Dimension Warrior Lady. Yes, after damage calculation, when this card battles a monster, banish that monster and this card. So yeah, not much to say about that. Future Samurai. Let's see. Gemini effect. Once per turn, you can banish a monster from the graveyard to target a monster on the field and destroy that target. Possibly in the same place as Evocato Chevalier, so I can forgive this, but for this deck strategy, you might want to replace Future Samurai with Evocator Chevalier. But yeah, this guy's here as an alternative to Evocator so that they can just put 1 in the deck and say, hey, buy 2 more and replace this guy for him. But then again, maybe 2 of each would be just as fine, because Future Samurai, like Evocator, requires an equip spell to be on the field. Future Samurai, you just need to banish a monster in the field. Now it does target, so be aware of that. Target a face-up monster in the field, destroy that target. Kind of has points against it, so sort of a wash. It's a Gemini warrior monster, which is points for this deck. So yeah, it's iffy to keep this, but you could probably work with it. Field Commander Raz. See, when this card is normal or special summoned, choose a level 4 or lower warrior from the deck, except for Raz, and place it on top of the deck. Again, and they have the link for Freed. So again, see my mention on Freed. Why have this guy that only puts it on top of the deck when you can just get it right off the bat with reinforcement of the army? And since this is the final monster mentioned in the deck, I might as well just... well, no. I'll mention this monster and then the Crux equip spell, and then we'll go into the halftime review. So, the final monster is a Gemini monster, Dark Valkyria. Gemini effect. Once while this card is face up on the field, you can place a spell counter on it. This card gains 300 attack for each spell counter on it. You can remove a spell counter from this card, then target a monster on the field, destroy that target. So, this is essentially a Breaker the Magical Warrior, but with more steps that can destroy a monster on the field. It's sort of a balance. Like, does the fact that you put spell counter on it mean you can place spell counters on this monster? You know what? Let's look at the rulings. See if there's any rulings about it. You know what? Since the only thing we see is the previously official rulings... Wait, unofficial... No, that was... okay. This must be while Upper Deck Entertainment was still a thing. This will need some research. I'm just going to go by assumption that while it is treated as an effect monster, it can hold spell counters. That's what I'm going to say on this. But unless we see a ruling otherwise or some other thing, I'm getting a lot of ideas for decks, and this is the first deck idea specifically to test out Dark Valkyria's effect, specifically for spell counter placement. So, I don't know. Maybe make a mention in the comments. Tell me whether or not Dark Valkyria can actually hold spell counters outside of its effect that places it on itself. Because that would be pretty impressive if that's the case. Now we come to one of the most important cards of the deck, Supervise. This was the card I mentioned that would likely have thought to bring Gemini monsters to importance. It could, but I don't think it has. So, Supervise can only be equipped to Gemini monsters, and it gives them their effect status. When sent from the field to the graveyard, target a normal monster in the graveyard and special summon it. So, a pretty powerful card in its own right. It's very good for Gemini monsters to have, but it also adds to the argument that Geminis aren't fast enough to make it in the combat thing. So, like, that's 2 or 3 spaces that you don't have for other cards. There could have been a retrain since then that makes Supervise either obsolete or makes Supervise more viable. But for the contents of this deck, it's a crutch, I believe. So let's go ahead into the halftime report. And fortunately, it would seem the deck has, once again, like, it's been a while since we have to mention this, but this deck seems to have a lower end for the monster spell and trap ratio. But it's probably for good reason, as this deck likely features a bunch of equipped spells, so it can possibly be forgiven for the fact that it's got more spells than it does monsters. We'll see. But it seems we are now seeing the true crux of what this deck is about. It's half warriors and half Geminis. Now, if it can be more focused on the warrior aspect, then it might be good. Or if it's more focused on the Gemini aspect, possibly focus this deck more on the Gemini aspect or focus it more on the warrior aspect. But as it stands, it might not be able to do well either way. Because sometimes when it comes to deck building, if you chase 2 rabbits, you're going to lose them both. Anyways, let's go into the spell by going over the cards that we've already gone into. Let's see. Reinforcement of the Army, because warriors. Big Bang Shot, because equip spells. Mystical Space Typhoon, lets you remove a spell or trap on the field. Useful. There are more powerful options nowadays, though. Let's see. What else? Mind Control. This is the one... Target a monster your opponent controls till the end phase. Take control of the target, but it cannot declare an attack or be tributed. Very powerful nowadays, though, as you can just use it for a synchro or Xyz or fusion this way. Summoning from the extra deck with it. So this becomes powerful for removal, but does target. That's the issue. So yeah, pretty decent addition for the deck. Okay, I was expecting Mind Control to have points on it, but I think it's balanced itself out. But we do have 35 points for Reinforcement of the Armory, which seems I'd say, a good amount to put onto that. And right now, I don't really see this deck actually reaching 100 points, so it could stand for improvement. But let's continue. So next, Silent Doom. Let's see. Targeting normal monster in your graveyard, special summon it in face-up defense position, but it cannot attack. I think you would possibly be using this on the Blazewing Butterfly, because then you would normal summon it and then use its effect, thus circumventing the it cannot attack clause. So yeah, this one's a pretty good card to have in a deck by virtue of Blazewing Butterfly. But Monster Reborn would probably be a better option if you're going to use Silent Doom. Hidden Armory, one of the cards to support the equip part of this deck. Send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and an equip spell from your deck or graveyard to the hand. You cannot normal summon or set the turn you activate this card. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about for focusing on either Gemini or Warriors. Hidden Armory would likely be better off in a Warrior deck because this prevents you from normal summoning. So, to even use this card for the Gemini aspect, you would have to already have a monster on the field and then use Hidden Armory to get a hold of Supervise. That way, this is win more card for the Gemini aspect, and this would likely be better off in a Warrior deck because you then would have your normal summon freed up because you're not having to use it to get your Gemini effects, and you would likely be able to have more ways of getting a normal monster on the field that would circumvent the banning of normal summoning. So yeah, Hidden Armory is just a weird addition for the Gemini deck. Nightmare Steel Cage. Oops. While on the field for for 2 of your opponent's turns, no monsters can attack. Neither you nor your opponent's cards. They probably thought that Swords of Revealing Light was too powerful. But this is just becoming a mess, I think. Akibio Drakmord. Let's see. Okay. The equipped monster cannot attack. Destroy the equipped monster at the end of its controller's second turn after this card is activated. At that time, this card is returned to the owner's hand. So, yeah, this is definitely also trying to be an equip spell deck, because this would be something you'd want to equip to your opponent's monster to stop their attack. And this would also be one of the equip spells that you could use to activate Evocator Chevalier's effect. It's starting to get weirder and weirder, I think. We possibly have an ace equip spell in this deck in the form of Divine Sword Phoenix Blade. Only warrior type monsters can equip this card. The monster gains 300 attack. During your main phase, if this card is in the graveyard, you can remove from play 2 warrior type monsters to add this card to your hand. Yeah, it's an okay card. The attack boost is negligible, but if you need an equip spell, you can easily get this out because you can do so during the main phase. And this deck would likely want more warrior monsters in the graveyard. This would be one of the things to utilize that for. Yeah, I can see this being an okay card to add. I feel like, though, that there are better equip cards to use. Possibly. Then we've got Double Summon, because see. Double summon, of course, is in here because Gemini monsters require the normal summon, so you'd utilize this. But double summon has kind of become a win more card. Oh, and they rewarded it. You can conduct 2 normal summons or sets this turn, not just 1. Okay, that's makes it slightly less confusing. Symbols of Duty. Send a normal monster you control to the graveyard, then targeting monster in either player's graveyard, special summon it, and if you do, equip this card to it. When this card leaves the field, destroy the equipped monster. The only reason you would want this in the deck is because it utilizes equip spells, but this is essentially a monster reborn with extra steps. So why use this when you can use Monster Reborn to do the exact same thing for less cost and less stipulations? Final quarter review. More and more it's starting to look like a mess, but I'm starting to see what this deck is wanting to do. But it's trying to do too many things. Let's see if that holds true with the rest of the deck. Let's see. Swing of Memories. Let's see. Put simply, target a normal monster in the graveyard, special summon it, but destroy it during the end phase of this turn. This would likely be used for Blazewing Butterfly as well. So, yeah. Use this. Normal summon Blazewing Butterfly after its special summon. Yeah, this is pretty good for the deck, too. Oh. There's a spell I actually forgot to look into. Alright. For the longest time, this one has had a hand in the strategy, and the Genesys format might reinvigorate this. Burden of the Mighty. Each face-up monster your opponent controls loses 100 attack times its own level. So let's say your opponent has, let's say, a level 5 or a level 8 Synchro monster. That minuses its attack by 700 and 800. Those are very significant numbers to have a monster lose. And even for level 4 monsters, this can be something that will slow down your opponent's strategy. Although, it does have one key weakness. If the monster does not have a level, Burden of the Mighty does not affect it. Now, the only monster that can circumvent Burden of the Mighty itself is Xyz monsters. Because they do not have levels, they have ranks. And this is further compounded because outside of the Genesys, you now have Link monsters everywhere. So that makes this less viable. But we're talking about the Genesys format, so I can see Burden of the Mighty coming back in force. And only Xyz monsters can circumvent Burden of the Mighty. So this could have a place in the strategy era. So yeah. The final spell of the deck, Unleash Your Power. As I recall, it's a Gemini effect. Yep. Quick play spell. All Gemini monsters that were on your side of the field when this card was activated are treated as effect monsters and gain their effects. During the end phase of this turn, set all monsters affected by this card's effect. So, if you have a Gemini monster that has an effect that you would want to have active during your opponent's turn, that would be the best use for Unleash Your Power. Afterwards, the Gemini monsters get their effects reset because they get their effects after their normal summon as long as they remain face up. Otherwise, if they're flipped face down, they lose that effect and become a normal monster again. Which actually brings into thought that they would definitely be weak to cards like Book of Moon or Book of Eclipse. Because once they're flipped face down, they don't get their effects anymore, and you'll have to normal summon them again to get it again. But by that point, it might be too late. But Unleash Your Power could lend to possible strategies. However, we're not seeing any of that in the deck, but it's good to bring to light this. And I believe that was a card that was released alongside the very first Gemini monsters, which includes Gemini Golem list that is shown on the card. Alright, and now we go into the traps. Let's see. Alright, so there's only two that I've already gone over. We've got Sakuretsu Armor, which is battle protection. And then we have Kunai with Chain because equip spells. Let's see. Sakuretsu Armor, when your opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy that monster. Kunai with Chain. Actually, I don't know if I actually looked into that one. Let's see. Kunai with Chain. Activate one or both of these effects simultaneously. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attacking monster. Change that target to defense position. Then, you can equip this card to that target, and it gains 500 attack. Very famous trap card. Pretty decent effect. But more often than not, your opponent is going to have a board with more than one monster. Sakuretsu Armor. Let me double check this. Does it target? Okay, it targets. So, yeah. Sakuretsu Armor isn't that much better also. So, yeah. Both are very mediocre at best, but they can lend to tripping your opponent up by surprise. Now, here's one that I remember quite fondly. Dark Bribe. When your opponent activates a spell or trap, your opponent draws a card, and you also negate the spell or trap activation. If you do, destroy it. This is an alternative to cards such as Solemn Judgment, or like any counter trap that you would specifically want to negate spells and traps with. And like this was during an era where counter traps was a staple for the deck. Nowadays, it's less about traps and more about spells, and only certain decks would want a counter trap. However, let's see, like there are several different options, this being one of them, and it all depends on how badly you want to keep your opponent from doing things. Because here, you are giving them an extra hand advantage, but you're banking on the fact that the card they're trying to play is really the crux of their strategy, and it would mess them up enough that that extra draw won't even matter. It might also help if they draw into a Garnet. You know, think on that. Just something to consider when deck building. Soul Resurrection. Activate this card by targeting a normal monster in your graveyard. Special summon it in defense position. Okay. Essentially the same as Call of the Haunted. So, why use Soul Resurrection when you can use Call of the Haunted? I also see another card that's just the same. We also have Birthright, so I might as well cover it here too. Activate by targeting a normal monster in the graveyard. Special summon that target in attack position when this card leaves the field. Okay, so yeah, Birthright and Soul Resurrection essentially do the same thing. They bring back a normal monster. The only difference is what position you put it in. Now, granted, this allows you to have more copies of the same card, but you don't really want 6 Soul Resurrection and 6 Birthright. So it would be better if you just have 3. If you want to run that many, it would be better to just have 3 Call of the Haunted as opposed to Soul Resurrection and Birthright. Although if I recall correctly, I think Call of the Haunted was limited when this deck was released. I could be wrong. Just a break. When your opponent's monster declares an attack on your normal monster, destroy all monsters on the field except for attack position normal monsters. This, again, we're seeing a whole bunch of cards. Why use that begs the question, why use it when the other card exists? Why use Just a Break when all of the Mirror Force cards exist? I'm pretty sure Blazing Mirror Force would probably be a better option for this deck's theme. And then we have Gemini Trap Hole. Activate only when a Gemini monster that is treated as an effect monster is destroyed by battle. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Again, Torrential Tribute. Well, no, maybe not Torrential Tribute, but the Mirror Force cards or even Ferret Flames would be a better option for these two. Final review. Is this deck Genesys ready? It can be used in Genesys, but I would definitely say it is not Genesys ready. And I will state why. Like, not only can it be seen as underpowered, but it's also way too unfocused in what it's trying to do. It is trying to do 3 separate strategies at once. It is trying to be a Gemini deck, it is trying to be a warrior deck, and it's trying to be an equipped deck. And while warriors do mesh with the Gemini strategy and they do mesh with the equipped strategy, as you can probably see already, all 3 at the same time is not going to work. You're going to want to focus either on Geminis or on equip spells. And for this deck specifically, I would recommend focusing on the Gemini aspect and maybe subduing the equip spell part. Possibly just use Supervise, possibly Phoenix Blade even. Those 2 you could probably keep in here. But the rest of the equip spell strategy, put it on the wayside. And there's a whole bunch of cards. You can possibly put the point values into alternative cards that are much better than what is on offer here. Cards like Monster Reborn and maybe some of the Mirror Force traps. So yes, in review, Warrior Strike would get you a C grade. It's usable in Genesys, but it is not going to get you far unless some very major tweaking is done to the deck. And I say this with a heavy heart because I do recall wanting to make it work and it not really working out. Which is why I'm absolutely ecstatic for next week. We'll be going over a deck that I actually have had some modicum of success with, especially with a few more editions that had come out and with the editions that possibly have come out recently. So, until then, look forward to next week where we'll review Machina Mayhem. If you enjoyed this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and make sure the bell's ringing. That will keep you up to date on my uploads. I'll also be putting polls and events on my Sure page. Be sure to check that out. And with all that said, and I also live stream on Twitch. I'll be putting on the calendar when and what. And with all that said, thank you for tuning in. This is Controlled Chaos, signing out.